Part 2. Number 18. Dear Johan, we're looking forward to learning more about your company so that we can propose the most appropriate equipment that will help you achieve your company's goals. Because your business is important to us, we wanted several of our staff to meet you during this initial discussion. Ivan Reinold, Vice President of Marketing, Glenn Fisher, one of our technical specialists, and Miles Burns, our design engineer. Coordinating our schedules has been difficult because Ivan travels so extensively. So I'm wondering, would you mind if we postponed our August 15th appointment until the week of September 1st? Please let me know if the week of September 1st will be a possibility for you. If it's not possible, we can go ahead with the meeting as previously scheduled without Ivan. We're looking forward to establishing a long-term, mutually beneficial relationship with you. Thank you. Sincerely, Carl Roth. Number 19. Everyone else's pencils were moving quickly as they worked on the math problem. And the more Sophie imagined how the others had understood it, the more she panicked. Sophie's pencil shook in her hand as she worked on the problem. She scribbled something down, hoping that Mr. Klein wouldn't ask her to speak out in front of the class. "Pencils down," said the teacher. Sophie obeyed, keeping her eyes on her exercise book. "Sophie, please tell us the answer to the first question." "I think it's—" She paused, delaying the inevitable ridicule she knew was coming her way. 21 squared, she said. "Does anyone else think that's the right answer?" asked the teacher, prolonging Sophie's agony. Mr. Klein put his head slightly to the left side and said, "That was incorrect, Sophie." Just then, the end-of-school bell rang out. She sighed heavily and stared down at her paper. Her friends gathered to comfort Sophie, but she laid her head down at her desk and said, "Why me? I think it's better to give up math as soon as." Number 20. There's no law stating that if you want to build self-discipline, you need to immediately wake up at 4 in the morning, eat nothing but vegetables and fruits, work productively for 12 hours, 7 days a week, and abstain from every pleasure, trying to mimic the life of a medieval ascetic. Setting aside the fact that most of these habits are not necessary to become self-disciplined, self-control isn't built in one day. You're building it step by step, starting from an easy challenge, and then building on top of it. Don't feel anxious or guilty that you begin your exercise plan with a 5-minute walk, or that you commence your new nutrition plan with a resolution that you'll add 1 vegetable and subtract 1 candy bar a day. Try it, see what happens, and if it works out, set a bigger challenge. Nothing else is needed to begin the journey to a new you. Number 21. It is interesting to note that the quantum mechanics revolution was made by a virtually orphaned generation of scientists. Many members of the generation above them had been slaughtered in World War I. There simply weren't many senior scientists around to tell them they were crazy. Today, for graduate students and postdocs to survive, they have to do things that people near retirement can't understand. Doing science this way is like driving with the emergency brake on. Science requires a balance between rebellion and respect, so there will always be arguments between radicals and conservatives. But there is no balance in the current academic world. More than at any time in the history of science, the cards are stacked against the revolutionary. Such people are simply not tolerated in the research universities. Little wonder, then, that even when the science clearly calls for one, we can't seem to pull off a revolution. Number 22. An accomplished photographer can communicate visual experiences that remain firmly defiant to words. The writer, Albert Camus, stated, "If we understood the enigmas of life, there would be no need for art." We know that words have the power to name the unnameable, but words also hold within them the disclosure of a consciousness beyond language. Photographs may also convey the sensation and emotional weight of the subject without being bound by its physical content. By controlling time and space, the photo-based images allow viewers to examine that which attracts us for often indescribable reasons. They may remind us how the quickly glimpsed, the half-remembered, and the partially understood images of our culture can tap into our memory and emotions and become part of a personal mental landscape that makes up an integral component of identity and social order. Number 23. An important individual difference variable positively correlated with level of sport fandom is past or present participation as an athlete. In fact, the volume of early studies indicating that fans are or were actively involved in sport suggests that this variable may be one of the best predictors of sport fandom. Work in subsequent decades has proved the positive relationship between fandom and athletic participation, leading some to suggest that hosting major sporting events may lead to greater athletic participation. That is, the increased noticeability of and interest in fandom resulting from large-scale sporting events may increase sport participation rates among the population. Interestingly, one of the more common criticisms of sport fandom is the belief that these individuals are passive, sloth-like creatures who rarely get off their couch. However, the high levels of physical activity among sport fans are frequently used to challenge this stereotype. Number 24. Social psychologists study the many ways people are influenced to accept ideas that they hear or read or even work out in their own thinking. It is important to know what constitutes good evidence and to recognize the ways people are influencing us, not by evidence or good thinking, but by tricks, by false logic, and by making themselves attractive. It is important to understand our emotional commitments, our values, our biases, our culture, and our positions and structures in order to evaluate how we should criticize our own views and those of others. In some ways, learning is buying something from someone who is selling. Freedom of thought must include a knowledgeable thinking process, being active rather than passive. One must habitually question, evaluate, and think about the knowledge and thinking he or she uses. Number 25. Share of respondents who actively avoided news in 2017, 2019, and 2022. The graph above shows the share of respondents in 5 countries who said they actively avoided news in 2017, 2019, and 2022. For each country, the percentages of active news avoiders in 2022 were higher than those in 2017 and 2019. More than half of respondents in Brazil said they actively avoided news in 2022, while less than 1/3 of respondents gave the same response in 2017. In 2017, the UK had the lowest percentage of respondents who actively avoided news among the 5 countries. The percentage of respondents in France who actively avoided news in 2019 was the second lowest among the 5 countries. The percentage gap between 2019 and 2022 was the smallest in the USA, whereas the gap was the largest in Australia for the same years. Number 26. Kenneth Mackenzie Clark was born in London in 1903 to a wealthy family in the textile trade, as the only son of Scottish parents Margaret and Kenneth Clark. The son of wealthy parents, Clark was introduced to art at an early age. He graduated from Trinity College, Oxford, in 1925. In 1931, at the age of 27, Clark was appointed director of Ashmolean Museum, and 3 years later he was hired as the National Gallery's youngest ever director. With the approach of war with Germany in 1939, He managed the relocation of the National Gallery's collection to a bomb shelter in Wales. He also introduced a series of lunchtime concerts at the National Gallery, which became hugely popular and served as a symbol of cultural resistance to Nazism. In 1946, Clark resigned from the National Gallery to devote more time to writing, but he continued to give talks on the arts. After leaving the gallery, he became a celebrity, the public face of high culture, thanks to his TV program, Civilization, in 1969. Number 27. 2023 Rubber Band Car Competition. The Woodgate High School's annual Rubber Band Car Competition is just around the corner. So build your own rubber band car and enter it in the competition to see whose rubber band car travels the farthest. Rules. Construct a car powered by 3 or fewer rubber bands. Only official rubber bands can be used. Official rubber bands will be provided by teachers at the school science lab on October 20th. Cars will travel down a straight track that is 1.5 meters wide. Each participant is given 2 trials. The longer distance of the 2 trials will be used as their final score. Awards. First place, $100. Second place, $75. Third place, $50. Visit www.woodgatehigh.edu to learn more about the competition. Number 28. 2023 Traditional Asian Performing Arts Competition. The Traditional Asian Performing Arts Competition is an annual event held to serve as an opportunity for young students to exhibit their talent in traditional Asian dance and music. When and where? Date and time: November 11th, 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. Place: Middlemount County Academy Auditorium. Competition age divisions: Group 1, 13 to 15 years old. Group 2, 16 to 19 years old. Group 3, 20 years and up. Competition categories: Traditional Asian music, Traditional Asian dance. Registration fee: Individual participant, $50. Team of 2 to 5 participants, $100 per team. Team of 6 or more participants, $150 per team. Notes: Winners will be notified individually through email and text message. The first place winners' performances will be recorded and posted on the official website, www.mmculture.org. For more information, email us at info@mmculture.org. Number 29. The world is going to depend on the rapidly developing economies for one of our most important natural resources, fresh water. Over the last 100 years, water needs have increased tenfold. Worldwide, the biggest user of fresh water is agriculture, which still represents 70% of all water used, with industry consuming about 21%, and individuals the remaining 10%. There is a widespread view that the wars of the future will be waged to secure water sources rather than oil or gas. A small number of countries make up the world's largest freshwater reservoir, accounting for 60% of resources, and these include 2 of the 4 BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, and China. Brazil has the world's greatest water reserves, most of which are in the Amazon River, followed by Russia, which claims 20% of the world's total unfrozen freshwater reserve in Lake Baikal. The BRICS' attitude to sustainability will impact the entire world. Number 30. Although herbicide use is widespread in the context of invasive species management, most people in the restoration community consider herbicides a less than ideal option because of the known risks associated with their use. Land managers sometimes use mechanical methods like mowing, tilling, burning, and digging either alone or in concert with an herbicide in order to clear an invaded area, so that they end up using less herbicide to achieve their goals. But these methods aren't useful in all restoration projects since they tend to be unspecific. When a rototiller tills up soil, it tills everything, not just the target species. Sensitive or endangered native plants or animals might be harmed by these methods. They also might not be economically suitable when the invaded area is extensive. Mechanical control is a useful tool in non-chemical invasive species management, but people still typically use it within the framework of rooting out the invasive species quickly and completely, a paradigm that fails to account for the whole system and thus is not ultimately effective. Number 31. The process of developing higher-yielding technologies is a self-amplifying process. Once new inputs become established, a process is unleashed that causes farmers to keep buying new technology and overproducing. This was explained in agricultural economist Willard Cochrane's theory of the technology treadmill. This classic theory points out that agricultural technologies are taken up by early adopters who reap initial profits. As more farmers adopt the new technology, overall production rises and prices drop, putting farmers under pressure to produce even more. Then other farmers are pressured to adopt the new technology in hopes of higher yields. The so-called laggards, especially those with smaller operations, can't afford the greater outlay and are less able to recover the higher production costs at the lower output prices. This squeezes non-adopting farmers out of farming, leaving them to be cannibalized by selling or leasing to larger farmers who need to expand to capitalize on the technologies they are buying. Number 32. The expansion of Europeans throughout the world since the beginning of the modern period, certainly, whether for commerce, war, or colonization, has seldom been constrained by the perception that this or that fruit is inaccessible. Indeed, what we see is perhaps a different species of irrationality altogether, not one wherein existing desires are diminished in view of limitations, but rather wherein limitations are overcome for the purpose of creating new desires. This is, in sum, the argument of many historians of exploration and trade, notably Sidney Mintz in his influential 1985 work, Sweetness and Power, The Place of Sugar in Modern History. Early modern globalization was not, as we might imagine, driven by a desperate need among Europeans to go out and find absolutely essential goods of which there had previously been a short supply. Rather, it was driven in no small part by a search for luxury goods, spices, silk, coffee, tobacco, sugar, and many other commodities Europeans naturally did not know they needed until they knew they existed. Number 33. In 1948, Burroughs F. Skinner ran a groundbreaking, but also hilarious, behavioral psychology experiment known as the superstitious pigeon experiment. He put hungry pigeons in a cage and taught them that if they clicked a button, their food would be dispensed. Then he took away the button and switched the food to be dispensed automatically every 20 seconds. But these birds had learned that action equaled reward. They didn't realize the reward now happened automatically. Instead, if a bird happened to flap their wings just before the food was dispensed, then they associated that movement with getting the food. Wanting more food, they'd do it again, and eventually more food would drop. They quickly began to believe that repeating that action was causing the food to be delivered. The pigeons in the experiment began to display all sorts of odd, ritualistic behavior, spinning in circles, swinging their heads back and forth, bobbing up and down, and would repeat these behaviors incessantly, never making the connection that the treat came automatically, even if they did nothing at all. Number 34. The prototype of automatic thinking is the thinking involved when we drive a car. we respond to stimuli not present in the environment. For example, the expectation that the light will be red before we get to the intersection. Our thought processes are so automatic that we are usually unaware of them. We steer the car to reach a desired position without being aware that what we are doing is turning the steering wheel a certain amount so that the car will respond as we desire. It is only when we are learning to drive that we are aware of the thought processes involved. And in fact, we have really learned to drive only when we cease being aware of them. While much of driving involves motor programs as opposed to mental representations, we nevertheless do think. This thinking is so automatic, however, that we can carry on conversations at the same time, listen to music, or even create prose or music in other parts of our head. When automatic thinking occurs in less mundane areas, it is often termed intuition. Number 35. An individual's attachment style is a measure for the quality of his or her social bonds with others. It is crucially shaped through interactions with caregivers in early life, such as a child's parents. If others close to a child are responsive and caring, the child develops a secure attachment style. If they are unresponsive or inconsistent in their behavior towards the child, however, the child develops an insecure, either avoidant or anxious attachment style. Once acquired, the attachment style of a person is believed to remain rather stable throughout the lifespan, and to even be transmitted from one generation to the next. These parenting styles differ based on which generation is doing the raising, as well as the time period the child is growing up in. It is therefore likely to circularly influence many of the steps involved in social brain development and skill acquisition during childhood, adolescence, and even adulthood. Number 36. At the risk of sounding provocative, we argue that there is no such thing as mind. It exists only in the sense that, say, weather exists. Weather is a concept used to include rain, wind, humidity, and related phenomena. We talk as if there is a weather when we say things like, "The weather is interfering with my travel plans," but no one really thinks that there is a weather. Most, though not all, neuroscientists believe that we should think of the mind in the same way. It is simply the collection of things the brain does, such as thinking, sensing, planning, and feeling. But when we think, sense, plan, and feel, we get the compelling impression that there is a mind behind it all, guiding what we do. Most neuroscientists say this is just an illusion, that the sense of mind is nothing more than the awareness of what the brain is doing. Mind, like weather, is just a concept. It is not a something. It does not do anything. Number 37. Each individual deciding to buy or postpone a purchase, or to take up a job or wait for a better one, acts on their own impulses, and, it is hoped, uses their powers of reasoning as well. They are unpredictable individually, but collectively the decisions form a pattern. Think of what might happen if physical objects had a mind of their own and acted of their own volition. The apple that fell on Newton's head inspired the theory of gravity. But if an apple had its own volition, it might well have decided not to come down, but to go back up to its perch. The subject matter of economics consists of individuals with volition, unlike the subjects of natural science. The economist's hope is that while individual agents may have their own reasons for behaving any way they like, as a group, their behavior will show some regularity and predictability. Devices, such as the invisible hand, are ways of coping with this complexity so that we can grasp its working. Number 38. Global oil prices are possibly the single greatest variable that will influence the demand for American liquefied natural gas, LNG, exports, because they impact the gas markets in several ways, For one, gas pricing outside North America is still largely linked to oil pricing, so declining oil prices depress international gas prices. Low oil prices make the costly practice of shale exploration a more risky and less profitable venture. Because of the high cost of drilling, drillers will normally consider the price of drilling a well as a sunk cost. Because that cost is already unrecoverable, the driller may as well produce gas. However, low oil prices may mean losses on incremental costs, and therefore losses in profit, which may in turn discourage drillers from producing natural gas at all. Thus, perhaps the biggest threat to the future of U.S. shale production and LNG exports is a period of sustained low oil prices. Number 39. When it comes to measuring customer satisfaction, a distinction should be made between object-oriented and incident-oriented inquiry. In cases of object-oriented practices, a judgment of satisfaction is composed, which is determined by individual quality characteristics, such as cleanliness, punctuality, and friendliness. With the help of rating scales, the strengths and weaknesses of the company are then identified. An incident-oriented practice, on the other hand, refers to moments, incidents, in which the customer comes into immediate contact with the service provider. The passenger is questioned in open, personal interviews about context-related episodes and stories such as the experience of buying a ticket or the trip itself. Through these detailed analyses, concrete instances and causes for service deficiencies in individual phases of the service provision process are determined. The operating costs of inquiry and evaluation are, however, accordingly high. Object-oriented inquiries, conversely, are significantly easier to administer due to the possibility of standardization. They also offer the advantage of applying time series to the individual quality characteristics and showing before-after comparisons. Number 40. It would be easy to state that in the future, most kinds of music will use the technology of our time. They more or less already do. However, it is relevant to make this statement because still today, most European art music, however we may choose to define it, is produced using the technology of somebody else's time. Most art music is still written for string quartets, symphony orchestras, and instruments and instrumental combinations created in some time other than ours to fulfill the needs and vision of a different epoch. Even the microphone, this most fundamental and ubiquitous of musical instruments of the early 20th century, yes, musical instrument, is still waiting to be acknowledged by the European serious music world. Not to mention the computer. This historical anomaly, a practice of rejecting the possibility of working with technology of one's time, is luckily limited to the Western serious music community. The musics of most other cultures, from Indian to jazz, tango to rock, have incorporated or even pioneered technological changes. Unlike the music of other cultures, which is open to employing the advancements in technology, the Western European art music community is reluctant to adopt contemporary forms of technology. Numbers 41 and 42. Our current medical world is based largely on averages. Not every drug, for example, works for every person, but if it works for even a moderate percentage of people, regulators will often approve it. If you show up in a standard doctor's office with a condition that could be treated with the drug, generally there's a very simple way you find out if it works, by trying it. If you take the common blood thinner, warfarin, and it helps, that proves it is right for your biology. If you are among the 1 in 100 people for whom warfarin causes internal bleeding and possibly death, you learn the opposite the hard way. Generalized medicine was our only way to do things when our understanding of how each individual human being works was low. In the coming world of personalized medicine, this approach will seem the equivalent of leeches. Instead of just seeing a doctor, you will see a doctor paired with an AI agent. Your treatment for diseases from headaches to cancers will be chosen based on how well they work for a person like you. Every person's individual biology, including your gender and age, the status of your microbiome, your metabolic indicators, and your genes, will be the foundation of your medical record and care. Numbers 43 through 45. Ryan toddled around the corner and into the living room, where he stopped cold. His little mouth dropped open, and the light in Ryan's eyes rivaled the glow of the lights on the Christmas tree. What he saw there were two big shiny toy trucks. One was a trailer truck, and the other was a fire truck with a ladder. There were other packages too, but those would have to wait. He only had eyes for the two toy trucks. I looked at my husband, Mike. He was looking at his son. I couldn't tell whose eyes were brighter. "Those are for you, Ryan," Mike said. That was all the encouragement he needed. Ryan climbed on the toy fire truck and rode 3 laps around the living room. Then he hopped off and lay down on his belly, pushing the toy trailer truck and making engine noises. "He's such a boy," I said to Mike, who was already down on the floor with Ryan. I wasn't sure which of the two of them had more fun. Eventually, we had to remind Ryan that he had other presents to open. With each present, Ryan seemed happy and excited. What he really wanted, though, was just to play with his trucks. But there was something unusual about those toy trucks that he didn't notice. The company that makes the toy trucks is famous for using standard colors on its toys, mostly school bus yellow. However, Ryan's toy trailer truck was navy blue, and his fire truck was wine-colored with a silver ladder. As a matter of fact, Ryan's toy trucks were not like the ones currently available in the store at all. They were the good old hard metal ones, and Mike used to play with them when he was a child. For about a month, Mike had spent most of his time after work in the garage, cleaning, repairing, and sanding those trucks to make them as good as new. Then he had repainted them. Now he was getting the payoff for his labor of love. Ryan was in a kid heaven.